I want to do a little bit of reporting here. We can now confirm, to Jill Wine-Banks' point, there are 6 unindicted co-conspirators here, unnamed as well. They're just called Conspirator 1 through Conspirator 6. NBC News can now confirm that co-conspirator, I should say, number 1 appears to be Rudy Giuliani, and they are described in this indictment as an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies that the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign attorneys would not. In the indictment, they tell several stories that do make it appear that it is Rudy Giuliani, including the story about the allegations that he made against Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Shay Moss. They spell those out in the indictment, which makes it pretty clear that this does appear to be Rudy Giuliani. Co-conspirator number 3, who is described in the indictment as well, is apparently Sidney Powell. That is the reporting from NBC News, that co-conspirator 3 is Sidney Powell. This person is described as an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud the defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. Nevertheless, the defendant embraced and publicly amplified co-conspirator 3's disinformation. That person appears to be Sidney Powell. Let me do a little bit more here. Mike Pence has issued a statement. And here it is. It says, today's indictment serves as an important reminder. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. I will have more to say about the government's case after reviewing the indictment. The former president is entitled to the presumption of innocence, but with this indictment, his candidacy means more talk about January 6th and more distractions. As Americans, his candidacy means less attention paid to Joe Biden's disastrous economic policies affecting millions across the United States, and yada, 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 yada. Then he goes into like an attack on Joe Biden. I do want to bring you in, Ankush Kharduri, because Kharduri, it does appear that, Mike Pence did not participate in the January 6th hearings. He refused to testify. He's refused to participate. He's refused to even call January 6th an insurrection. He very likely will have to testify against Donald Trump as a I assume, right? He would be a prosecution witness.
It does appear that way from the allegations in the indictment that Pence would be an essential witness on some of the events here.
And so what would be the use of his, he was a potential victim, right?
Yeah, in a sense, he's a potential victim of the effort to sort of get him to throw the certification to Trump. But also he's there, or would be there, to talk about all the things that Trump was being told about whether or not he actually lost the election, the legal theory or lack thereof for the grounding for the legal theory, and what Trump himself was saying and doing. And I can't help but notice that, the indictment is pretty light on things that were coming out of Trump's mouth. Mm-hmm. And so I suspect we're going to be learning more about that as the case unfolds. And it's not necessary for them to lay all that out in detail in this particular document. But people like Pence, the people who are actually with him, physically with him during these key meetings and speaking to him, are going to be essential witnesses in this case.
Right. And Ryan, he'll be a reluctant witness, but it will be an awkward situation because he is running against Donald Trump, and he seems reluctant to really talk about him, although he has said repeatedly that he thinks what he did violated his oath, and it attempted to get Pence to violate his as well.
That's right. And we saw him, go before the grand jury, and they sort of swept him in these black cars, went into the garage and went up. And then this was all unfolding during, of course, the Oath Keeper, or rather the Proud Boys seditious conspiracy trial. And, it is really remarkable, I think, at this moment to see, after sitting through so many of these January 6 hearings and seeing people who had their lives ripped apart because they bought into these lies, I just wonder what a lot of them are thinking now that you actually have some degree of culpability or some degree of accountability for Donald Trump himself. Because, just a few days ago, there was a family of these individuals who all sort of bought in to the lies. And their son, who was 18 at the time, actually physically stormed the Capitol, was in the gallery above, went down onto the floor, was covering up the cameras, was trying to open up the doors. And they afterwards, the parents went before the judge and said, hey, I was tricked, I was fooled, and told them they were really embarrassed by their actions because they were full-grown adults and should have known better than to believe these really obvious lies. And, that's really the sort of at the heart of this case, is that this was really obvious at the time to anyone who looked at this with just basic human understanding or basic logic that this was nonsense. So I think that that's like what they're trying to emphasize here, is that Donald Trump, who purports to be one of these really intelligent people, had to have known that this was absolute garbage. There's just no way anyone who looks at this honestly could say otherwise. And that's, I think, what they're really trying to prove.
Well,